In this video, we're diving into the incredible story of a 60-year-old sailor who was told he'd never be able to sail around the world alone. Despite all the warnings, he set sail into the unknown, facing dangers, triumphs, and lessons that would change his life forever. But what does it really take to circumnavigate the globe alone? What risks did he face, and how did he survive them? Throughout this journey, we'll uncover the essential actions and decisions that made the difference between success and disaster. From the crucial gear to the life-saving tactics he used to tackle fierce storms, and the mistakes that nearly cost him everything. These are the lessons every sailor needs to know. Imagine setting out on a journey where the ocean is your only companion, and every decision could be the difference between life and death. In this video, we'll break down the critical moments of his voyage, explaining what worked, what didn't, and how you can learn from his experiences. Grab your charts and your compass. This journey is packed with insights, essential sailing tips, and expert advice. Stick with us until the end, and we'll ask you, what would you do if you had to sail around the world alone? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss more unforgettable adventures and lessons from the high seas. Let's set sail. Robert Bob Thompson was 60 years old when he decided to do what many considered impossible: circumnavigate the globe alone. A retired engineer from Chicago, Bob had spent decades sailing on Lake Michigan, building experience in coastal and inland navigation, but he had never faced the open ocean. He wasn't young, he lacked experience in ocean crossings, and everyone around him, friends, family, even seasoned sailors in Fort Lauderdale, told him he couldn't do it. "You're too old," they warned. "The ocean is unforgiving, and you've never faced anything like this." But Bob had a dream, and his determination outweighed the doubts. He knew his age might be a challenge, but he believed that with the right preparation, he could prove everyone wrong. The sailboat he chose for this journey was the Tenacity, a Valiant 40, an American vessel renowned for its robustness and reliability on long-distance voyages. Built by Valiant Yachts, the boat wasn't a luxury yacht, but a workhorse designed to tackle the oceans. The Tenacity measured 40 feet in overall length, 34 feet at the waterline, with a beam of 12 feet 4 inches and a draft of 6 feet. Its displacement was 22,500 pounds, with 7,700 pounds of ballast, ensuring stability in rough conditions. The total sail area was 772 square feet, and a 50-horsepower Perkins 4-108 engine provided backup during calms. The water tank held 120 gallons, and the fuel tank held 95 gallons, allowing for long passages without resupply. Bob knew this boat would be his home, his fortress, and his only companion in the months ahead. Preparation took a year. Bob installed a B&G Triton autopilot, a hydrovane wind vane for power-free self-steering, and a full navigation system, including a chart plotter, AIS, and SSB radio for long-range communication. He added a Spectra water maker, capable of producing 8 gallons of fresh water per hour, essential for a solo crossing. 2 100-watt solar panels charged a bank of 4 12-volt AGM batteries, and he carried a 406 MHz EPIRB for emergencies. Every detail was considered. The mast's standing rigging was inspected, seacocks were serviced, and he stocked 300 pounds of provisions, including rice, beans, flour, and canned goods. Bob also took courses in celestial navigation and first aid, knowing he'd be completely alone, with no immediate help in the middle of the ocean. Despite all his preparation, the criticism persisted. "You've never faced the Pacific," they said. "What if something breaks? What if you can't handle the solitude?" Bob listened but didn't give up. He wanted to prove that age wasn't a barrier. In October 2023, Bob set sail from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a port known as a starting point for circumnavigations. His route was a classic one. Head down to the Caribbean, transit the Panama Canal, cross the Pacific to the Galapagos Islands in French Polynesia, pass through Australia, navigate the Indian Ocean to Mauritius in South Africa, round the Cape of Good Hope, and return via the South Atlantic to the US, covering about 25,000 nautical miles. The first leg, from Fort Lauderdale to the Bahamas, was an initial test. With 15-knot winds, he sailed at 6 knots, but soon faced a tropical storm off Bimini. 10-foot waves and 30-knot winds rocked the tenacity, and Bob realized he hadn't properly secured the dinghy, which nearly broke free from the deck. He spent hours in the rain, tying it down with an extra 1/2-inch line, learning a valuable lesson about the importance of checking every detail before a passage. Arriving in Nassau, he anchored in 15 feet of water, deploying 100 feet of G4 chain, and reflected on how the solitude was already weighing on him, but also how the sea made him feel alive. In the Caribbean, Bob encountered small challenges that prepared him for what lay ahead. In St. Lucia, he noticed the engine's alternator wasn't charging the batteries properly. After testing with a multimeter, he found a loose connection, a common issue in marine environments, and fixed it with a screwdriver and electrical tape. He also had to deal with humidity in his provisions, discovering that bags of rice were molding. He spent a day drying them in the sun and sealing them in vacuum bags, a practice that became routine. These setbacks were minor, but reminded him of the importance of self-reliance. In January 2024, he transited the Panama Canal, a 50-mile stretch that required $2,000 in fees and 2 days of intense navigation, dealing with 8-knot currents and cargo ship traffic. Bob hired 2 local line handlers, and the tenacity was raised 85 feet in the Gatun locks, an experience that made him feel the weight of the journey ahead. The Pacific crossing, a 4,200-mile journey to the Galapagos Islands, was a milestone. Bob sailed at 5.5 knots using a wing-on-wing sail configuration, with the Genoa poled out and the mainsail secured by a 5/8-inch preventer line. But 15 days into the passage, the watermaker stopped working. The high-pressure pump failed, and he discovered the pre-filter was clogged with plankton. Without enough spares, he improvised, cleaning the filter with a toothbrush and salt water, and managed to restart the system, producing 4 gallons per hour. Enough, but not ideal. He rationed water, drinking only 1 gallon per day, and noted in his logbook, "Never underestimate the importance of spare parts." During this passage, he also faced solitude. With no human contact for weeks, he started talking to the boat, calling the tenacity his old friend. At night, as the sky exploded with stars, he used his sextant to calculate his position, a 20-minute process that connected him to the traditions of ancient navigators. Arriving in the Galapagos, Bob anchored in Puerto Baquerizo Moreno, where he was awestruck by the giant tortoises and marine iguanas. He refueled with 95 gallons of diesel, but noticed the local fuel was dirty, which would later cause issues. Heading to French Polynesia, he sailed 3,000 miles to the Marquesas, facing a calm in the doldrums where winds dropped to 2 knots. The engine was crucial, but after 48 hours, the diesel filter clogged due to the contaminated fuel. Bob spent 6 hours replacing the filter, using a maintenance kit that included a Raker 500 FG, and noted the lesson: always filter fuel before filling up. In Nuku Hiva, he spent weeks exploring, trading provisions for fresh fruit with locals, and repairing a torn sail with a sailrite sewing machine, a task that required patience and 3 hours of work. From Fiji, he headed to Australia, arriving in Brisbane after 2,500 miles. Near the coast, he nearly collided with a cargo ship that didn't respond to VHF and wasn't transmitting an AIS signal. At 3 a.m., with low visibility, Bob spotted the ship's lights just 1 mile away. He quickly diverted, adjusting his course 30 degrees to port, and used his radar to monitor the distance. The incident reminded him of the need for constant vigilance, even with technology. In Brisbane, he did a full maintenance overhaul, applying anti-fouling paint and replacing a mast-supporting shroud that showed signs of fatigue, a critical repair for facing the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean crossing, a 2,000-mile journey to Mauritius, was the greatest test. 10 days after departure, a storm hit hard, 40-knot winds and 15-foot waves. Bob reefed the mainsail using the second reef point and adjusted his course to a 45-degree angle to the waves, minimizing the impact. But during the storm, he heard a snap. One of the shrouds, a 5/16-inch cable supporting the mast, started to fray. With no time to replace it, he improvised a repair, tying a Spectra line with a 10,000-pound braking strength as a backup, a process that took 2 hours in the rain and wind. The tenacity held, but Bob spent the next 48 hours monitoring the barometer, which dropped to 990 millibars, and adjusting the wind vane to stay on course. The experience left him exhausted but proud. He wrote in his log, "I survived the Indian Ocean. I can do anything." In Mauritius, he resupplied and continued to South Africa, rounding the Cape of Good Hope. The stretch was treacherous, with the Agulhas current reaching 5 knots and headwinds of 25 knots. Bob sailed cautiously, staying 50 miles offshore to avoid breaking waves, and arrived in Cape Town feeling stronger than ever. The final major crossing, the South Atlantic, was marked by a moment of beauty. Off the coast of Brazil, he spotted a pod of humpback whales which swam alongside the tenacity for an hour. Bob turned off the engine, letting the boat glide at 4 knots under sail, and felt a deep connection with the ocean, a moment that made up for all the challenges. In April 2025, after 18 months and 25,000 nautical miles, Bob returned to Fort Lauderdale. As the tenacity entered the harbor, friends and family waited on the dock, cheering and shouting with joy. Those who had doubted him now saw him as an inspiration. Bob, with a tanned face and shining eyes, hugged his daughter and said, "I told you I could do it." The journey had transformed him. He proved that age isn't a barrier, as long as there's preparation, resilience, and respect for the sea. But what were the lessons from this adventure? First, never underestimate the importance of spare parts. The watermaker issue could have been catastrophic if Bob hadn't improvised, but having more filters and membranes would have avoided the stress. Second, vigilance is essential. The encounter with the cargo ship showed that even with AIS and radar, the sea demands constant attention. Third, preventive maintenance saves lives. The frayed shroud could have brought down the mast, but Bob's improvised repair kept him safe. Fourth, solitude is a real challenge, but finding peace in routine, whether baking bread on board or watching the stars, can transform the experience. And finally, respect the ocean. Bob survived because he was prepared, but he knew the sea doesn't forgive mistakes. For the sailors watching, Bob offers practical advice. Always carry spares for critical systems, like pumps and filters. Use weather routing services like PredictWind to anticipate storms. Inspect your rigging regularly, using a magnifying glass to spot cracks. And above all, never underestimate the importance of a harness and jack lines, even in seemingly calm conditions. The sea changes fast, and being prepared is the difference between life and death. Bob Thompson's journey was more than a circumnavigation. It was proof that dreams have no age limit, as long as you're willing to work for them. He set out to prove something to others, but in the end, he proved it to himself. And now the question is for you. What would you do if you had to sail around the world alone? Leave your answer in the comments, subscribe, and hit the bell for more incredible stories of adventure and learning on the high seas. Fair winds, and see you next time.